Hello and welcome to the podcast where we're going to explore everything there is about game economy design, game balance and the general theory of commercialization of games. And I am delighted to be joined by James Portnow. James, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hello everybody, my name is James Portnow. I am a game designer by trade. I've worked on games ranging from the Call of Duty series to League of Legends to FarmVille, and I have a YouTube series called Extra Credits where we talk a lot about design.
Yeah, something which has annoyed me for years because you're so damn good at it, which is really annoying. But no, genuinely, I've been a huge fan of Extra Credits for a long time, and when we got to meet, which I think the fantastic example of for people to understand you is that you met me through taking me to an escape room with a bunch of other game designers, and I think that kind of is just the perfect epitome of what we're supposed to be about here. Anyway, so what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and explore the game economy, but from every angle of the process. And I want to start with just getting your take on, when you're looking at a game, what is the bit that you would consider to be the game economy?
So the game economy, you can argue, is consumable resources. I have a theory that I've been pursuing recently, which is that all of it can be drilled down to one fundamental consumable resource, which is human time. And that when you look at gold, when you look at XP, when you look at gems, whatever it is in your game, you can figure out as a designer how much time per unit of whatever that is and cost your game accordingly, and that's really the fundamental unit. But as I said, game economy...
But isn't there kind of a caveat to that, which is that time is dependent on the cohort, the kind of group of player, and their, I would argue, skill or tenacity, persistence. So time isn't just, to me, a question of a simple kind of ratio. Time is also broken down by session frequency, skill basis. So how would you kind of square that circle in that simple equation?
So the thing is, all these things are also true even if you use a different currency. How much gold how much gold I earn depends on my skill, right? How many gems I earn, whatever XP I'm gaining depends on my player skill, my session frequency, all these sort of things. And so I don't think that is too different whether you're looking at these as some concrete game element or as player time itself. But I think the big thing is, as a designer, to both understand your average case, but also, like with any game economy, we sort of have to place our players into buckets or groups, right? And say, okay, this is how the economy impacts this group. I've got these casual players. Now I've got these guys who are super hardcore, who live and die this game, who are on, I don't know how, but 18 hours a day. Things are balanced differently for them, right? They're going to experience the economy differently. They're going to hit that cap of, well, I literally don't have more items for you to buy because you've bought them all. And so you have to look at your player base also not as a homogeneous whole, but as specifically the types of human beings playing your games. Because the most important thing I say to all designers is that you are not building an experience on a screen, right? Like, you're not building what's there in the screen. You're building an experience for the person sitting in front of the screen, and your economy should be that too.
So, I mean, let's sort of dive a little bit deeper into that. So we're saying that basically when we're looking at a game economy, we're thinking about the management of time, essentially, or at least the exchange of time for some sort of commodity in the experience. But what does that commodity do? I mean, for me, the commodity is about driving the game forward, is about some sort of utility, some sort of player value. How do you kind of determine what that commodity's function is for?
So I think of games holistically as an experience, and I think of each commodity in my games, and I know I'm strange, I'm sure you're getting plenty of other answers in this, but I think of each commodity in my game as a ticket to an amusement park ride, right?
Yeah.
This commodity buys you this experience. Doesn't matter if it's a sword or a ticket to a magic draft, right? What you're buying is this experience that you want, and to make that purchase satisfying, the experience that you get out of buying that thing has to match or exceed the vision you had of it when you pressed the buy button, right? And that's my goal as a designer.
Yeah, and it's that kind of like one of the sort of principles is that I think we generally buy expectation of delight rather than the functional delight of itself, which is a kind of a difficult one to sort of square because, what is the difference?
Well, okay, so here's the big difference. When I buy a sword in the game, what I'm buying is, plus 40 power, plus 3 attack speed. I don't care about that. When I buy that sword, what I care about is, now I'm going to get through this level, I'm going to get to fight this cool boss, I'm going to get to fight new enemies, explore new areas. That's what I'm actually buying. So we have to remember that divide between the experience created by that sword. Maybe I'm just buying, I want to feel powerful, right?
Yes.
But that's what I'm buying. I'm not buying plus 3 speed, plus 40 attack power. That's not what I'm actually buying as a player.
No, I like the analogy of the Vorpal blade. The Vorpal blade, obviously, Wonderland. Well, the Snickersnack, because that allows me to fight a Jabberwocky. So the very fact that I have the Vorpal blade means I can now fight Jabberwockies. But the irony is that a Jabberwocky has now become just another monster. That's just another bigger rat. So that's kind of, to me, the kind of difference between that expectation versus long-term reality.
So here's the thing, and here's where we create the treadmill and economies, right? You are buying your Vorpal blade, you are buying a ticket, an unlimited ticket, a buffet ticket to experiencing the Jabberwocky fight.
Yeah.
Now, when you beat the Jabberwocky fight, when you go to the first Jabberwocky fight, it is awesome, right?
Yes.
Maybe the first...
Well, it better be.
You just paid for it, it better be. But... Now, I reference this a lot, but you probably heard me say this, but it's like eating a Snickers bar. The first one's great, second or third one's okay, after that they start making you sick and you really want something else. And so this is where that treadmill goes where, oh man, you were really excited about this Jabberwocky fight, you bought the Vorpal blade, you did it, it was awesome, you do it again, it's okay, you do it a third time, and now you're looking for something new to do, and I better have something else there in the store, or maybe on the body of the Jabberwocky, what have you, that brings you to the next experience that you want to have, or you're going to exit my game.
I think that's exactly it. So I think thinking about this flow, I'm thinking particularly about the role of grind in a game. We spend a lot of time in order to fill up people's, because at the end of the day, we are creating an experience that people use to spend time to entertain themselves and occupy themselves. And grind, whilst it's not necessarily a positively responded to concept, actually drives a lot of play. And going and fighting the 15th, the 30th Jabberwocky, we still do. But what is it that transitions? I feel it's a transition point between the exciting moment versus it becoming a grind. What do you think that transition is, and what helps us make that a useful, beneficial experience for a player? So
there are two aspects to grind. And one aspect, the positive aspect, is the promise of future experience. So I bought this Vorpal blade, I've beaten the Jabberwocky, I've beaten it a couple of times, I know how to do it, now it becomes a grind. But now that is the economy. Now if I beat the Jabberwocky 40 times, I'll level up enough, get the rare drop, and now I can do the next thing. So I'm actually buying the ticket to the next ride with the grind. Once again, we can reduce this all to time. But there is another aspect to it, which is the unfortunate aspect that I see way too many designs go into, which is that human beings are dangerously addicted to checking off boxes. We like the feeling of accomplishment, even if it is false. We like the feeling of progression, even if it is illusory. And so a lot of times what you'll see is the numbers go up, Skinner box treadmill, right? And that, when players are grinding simply to have the empty experience of feeling like they're making progress, you will eventually hit an exit point where the first day or maybe week where that player gets busy and they can't be grinding as much, and then they realize, oh, they don't actually care, right? They're going to exit. Whereas if you're grinding as a function of the economy with a goal in mind, you're much more likely to want to come back to it, even if you have to take a break, even if you get that more removed perspective on what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting kind of argument, and a lot of people use the. I mean, we're not going to go too deep into the addiction question, but I mean, addiction has become a kind of different thing nowadays in terms of perspective, particularly with the World Health Organization's, I think, incorrect classification of gaming disorder. But that's a conversation. Yeah, when you feel free.
I think it's worth the momentary diversion. I agree with you. I don't think that addiction is the right term for it. I was being hyperbolic, but I do believe there is a compulsion that, like, if you look at a lot of like the B.F. Skinner research, that sort of thing, we know we are manipulatable animals, and as such, we sometimes can end up in that trap. I don't think that addiction is the right word, but it's also we as designers can't absent ourselves of any responsibility.
No, absolutely, you're right. And I think what's fascinating about that phrase is that it used to be a term we used as shorthand, to talk about compelling behaviour, compelling as in desirable behaviour, and now it's become a stick to beat us with, like violence used to be a stick to beat us with. And it's like everyone wants to come up with a reason to diss on the new medium. Anyway, but I think there's something really interesting about that, and the whole B.F. Skinner thing. I love it, and I actually will cover this in the book as well, which is, Skinner talked about a process where you have a box with an animal in it, a pigeon or a rat typically, where they would essentially learn behaviour through rewards, as in food.
Right.
But they had no option to get food other than through those rewards.
Well, but the really interesting thing, the key insight of his research is that if you trained that behavior with the rewards, they would continue to perform the behavior when you took away the rewards.
Yes,
almost all Vegas slot machines are built on his research. A lot of our sort of grind treadmills are built on that research of, here is the rate at which you can remove rewards from the experience and continue to have the trained animal participate in the experience.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the kind of key examples of why gambling behaviour is different from a game behaviour, because of the thing you said earlier. Because in a game experience, the 15th Snickers bar becomes something that makes us sick.
Well, and
we get tired of.
And if I'm playing it for the experience of the play, then I don't think you can refer to it as addictive or even compelling in the bad sense, right?
Yeah.
The thing about pulling a slot machine lever is slot machines are not fun. They're not engaging. They're not an interesting experience. You are literally just pulling a lever, pressing a button.
Flash, 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 stimulation.
Right. But if that's what you're doing within your game, and I think there are games that rely on basically you doing just that, then we're on the bad side of that research. But if you're there for the experience of play, if you're having an actual human experience, then I think that you can't refer to it as addictive or even compelling.
And then that takes us back to these experiences, these grind moments that we then become tickets to the next entertainment feat, whatever that might be. And to me, then I think we end up with a very interesting kind of way of looking at kind of the economy of a game, as in, it's not, I would argue, it's not just about the time spent, but it is about creating a friction in order to then provide the feed of the next experience. That is, whether it's lubricant or friction, I think there's tension in terms of the way the economy operates to expose the rest of the game to that player.
Well, I think there's two elements, right? One, we can only build so fast. As developers, as creators, as designers, there's only so quickly we can build game elements. And consumers, players, will always consume them faster than we can build them. Therefore, we need some break, right? Like, we need some frictive element. And then the second part of this, I think, as you said, is that there is both satisfaction in earning these things, so long as there is always that reward ahead of an actual new experience. But in the grind itself, there are plenty of ways that we can make that experientially and intellectually interesting. I think that is also, if you have to put those sort of elements in your game, it is somewhat of your responsibility as a designer to make sure that there is play within the grind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think also there's something about the friction that makes the action more meaningful, because there's a satisfaction in the effort.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, if I give you a diploma, you don't care. If you spend 4 years in college, you are proud of that diploma when you get it. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think that there are plenty of games that rely on that player feeling of accomplishment whenever a new experience is achieved, right? From Software has built their entire career on delivering that specific satisfaction that comes with earning the next experience. And so long as you can create that, but in order, again, as we said, to create that, there has to be some actual play within within that earning, right? It can't just be I press the same button over and over and over again until... I mean, I remember our clicker days, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, look, I know that there are people who enjoy that, and there are a couple of very prominent games that are being very commercially successful right now that are basically that. But that's not the kind of game that I'm interested in making personally.
And I would even argue that the best clicker games give you ways to min-max the economy, to think about how you're putting your pieces together to get the most out of the passive time, right? I think that is sort of the difference, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about Adventure Capitalist, because I think those guys are fantastic.
Exactly.
And that game is a clicker game, but it's self-knowing, it's funny, it's you like you say, you can min-max it, and it is a ridiculous idle experience, but that's the point.
But there are two pieces to it, right? One, as you said, you keep unlocking new experiences. The humor in it is a new thing to experience as you keep progressing throughout the game. And also, at least for me, I found it to be an intellectual exercise, right?
Yeah,
exactly. I could let it run passive, but at the same time, I could look at it and be like, oh, this combination or this thing to build is the best thing to build right now. I feel some satisfaction, even if it's only going to get me there an hour earlier than my buddy or whatever, by not only having thought that through, but by the designers presenting me with a system that allows me to think that through.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that the Hyper Heavy guys are lovely people as well. But anyway, the point being that essentially what I think we're doing here is we're looking at kind of an economy of a game in terms of the lubrication of play, but also in the resistance to play. And there's another angle of that I think I want to explore, and that is the value perception. And to me, this is where scarcity is a factor. Supply and demand. If we restrict restrict supply, we will increase kind of the perceived value with the same demand. Now, how do we look at scarcity? Because for me, it's often down to different types of resources or availability of particular resources that are exchanged, and sometimes it maybe even flavored. This monster drops this kind of thing. This enemy drops that kind of weapon. Or the frequency in which these things are dropped. Do you look at scarcity when you're looking at that sort of element of the economy?
Yes, but I think that we have learned that you have to look far beyond just literal resource scarcity. Temporal scarcity is a big one, right? If you see, every MiHoYo game has this character is available for the next 20 days. If you don't get it now, who knows if it'll be back, right? And you might need it, and that's a massive driver of sales, right? You can also have temporal scarcity on the other side, where you go, well, I don't have 100 hours in my life to grind to level 60, but I want to be able to play with my friends, therefore I will go and drop some money or do whatever it is to be able to shortcut that. Then you have the other side, which is artificial scarcity or difficulty scarcity, where that raid item, you see that guy walking by in raid armor, and you're like, oh man, that guy's awesome. I wanna look like that person, right? Those items aren't scarce. There's infinite of them generated. If you could just grind them all day, you could get infinite of that. It's not actually scarce in any actual sense, but the sheer difficulty, the bar to ride, right, the table stakes for getting that is so high that it creates a scarcity even if there's no underlying programmatic scarcity. So I think when we look at scarcity is an important element of driving desire, of driving want, and of driving perceived value, but we have to look at all the different vectors of scarcity beyond just, oh, there's only like 5 of these on the server or whatever.
Yeah, and I think to your point, if every action is essentially a factor of time, and time versus skill, whatever, that you're still talking about that anything can be unlocked.
Right.
And then to my mind, it's a question of the level in which those commodities are synced into something, the drains that you put into the systems for that. But also, I think it does lead us into another way of thinking about these things, which is that something we talked about earlier, which is that essentially some of these commodities become prestige items in themselves. And do you want to sort of explore that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it's, again, another one of these factors of being a human being. Social aspects are very important to us in our purchases, right? We define ourselves by what we wear, what we drive, right? We all the time in our actual physical lives have a element of display that is a prestige element, right? We are a pack animal. We want to impress the rest of the pack with our status. And this translates over to games, right? And high status items are a very important part. An item that is only play relevant is not going to be as meaningful to players, at least in a multiplayer experience, as a item which is a play relevant and a status item. Now, it's interesting because you can also say that this is a cultural thing, and different cultures look at status items in different ways and view different things as status items. So you should always be remembering that as you're building out your economy. But it is still an important factor that you don't just think, this is the design problem, right? Again, don't just think of that item as plus 40 attack, plus 3 speed, right? Like, there's a lot more of the experience of that item to the human being who gets it.
Yeah, I mean, a particular example I think of is a mobile game I worked on many, many years ago where no one was spending the coins to unlock things because it was essentially being used as the primary measure of success. Of this is how far I had come. This is my progression graph. How many coins I have.
And it's amusing. I know I've chatted to you before about my Baudrillard, but right, like signifier becoming signified, when your economy becomes the status, when your coin becomes the item, it's no longer interesting, right? It breaks your whole design. You don't want that happening. Now, I don't know if you remember, but years and years ago, Nexon, one of the originators of free-to-play, came out with something that was one of their biggest sellers almost by accident. They had this item called the Money Bomb. And what the Money Bomb did is you bought it, I think it was like 99 cents or whatever, or a bunch of gems, and you'd buy it, and it did absolutely nothing for you. But when you opened it up, it was like a piñata, and it would spray items like above your head all around. So you'd walk into town square, and open up a money bomb, and everybody would cheer, and you'd get to be the hero, and it was a high status thing. It was exciting. You'd have fun. You'd for a moment get to be really important and favored by the people around you, and it was a big mover. And so I think it's important that we think about that element as well, and what and how we deliver on status items in a way that are actually enjoyable for the player, rather than in a way that sort of prevents the player from actually enjoying the game itself.
Yeah, and I think this is a massively important aspect. I've forgotten who said it. It was a conference I was at in London earlier this year. Oh, sorry, earlier last year now, because it's now, at the time of recording, it's just 2025. But in 2024, there was a speaker talking about vanity items. And one of the things I think was really important he said is that you can't have vanity goods if you don't have a vanity loop. So if people don't have the ability to show off, what is the point of having these cosmetics, these status items? And in particular, saying about the Nexon thing, is what made that essentially valuable to the player was the impact it had on the other players currently playing around them.
Right.
And I think that is so undervalued and so underestimated in many ways. Like I say, I wish I could remember the name of the guy that said it, because I think it just nailed something I've been trying to phrase for a long time. So status is a factor, time is a factor, exchange is a factor, but at the end of the day, we're still creating these playable experiences. So let's kind of pursue that a little bit further. So I'm thinking particularly in terms of how we have a tendency that if you perform well, that you'll get the biggest rewards. Now, one of the reasons why this kind of matters to someone like me, who's like dyspraxic and will never be the best first-person shooter, is that first-person shooters are my love, but I don't play them anymore because I'm disincentivized from playing them, because the very reason is that everybody else gets infinitely better than me, because not only are they more skilled and have better reactions, they also get all the good stuff.
So I find this to be a really interesting element, right? We have this feedback loop that I consider to be poor design, the win more feedback loop, which especially in multiplayer games is incredibly dangerous, right? What you want is catch-up mechanics. What you want is the blue shell in Mario Kart, right?
Yeah.
For those out there who don't play a lot of Mario Kart, there is an item that you can only get if you are in last place. What it does is it fires basically an unmissable missile at the person in first place. There's a huge explosion taking not only anybody in first place, but anybody close to them, so you can sort of catch up. Because it is never fun for the person in first place to be 3 laps ahead of the person in last place, right? Like, that's not exciting for either player. You want to have that closeness, and so finding ways to make sure that you're rewarding the player without having mechanics that get them so far ahead is a tightrope to walk, but one that is worth the walking. And a lot of this will be exploitable. Like, obviously, you have to work out that in your game. But for example, in a shooter, if I take someone down who has a much better gun or is a much higher level than me, well, I should be rewarded more than them taking me down, right?
Yeah.
If I take down someone with a higher level gun, maybe I get to loot that gun, right? If I take somebody down of a higher level, maybe they get 10 XP for killing me, but I get 1,000 for killing them, right? Yeah. To bring us closer to parity. I find extraction looters to be a fascinating space today in the economic side, because you're staking all of the things that you bring into each match. And so on the rare chance that you do take out that high-level player, you catch them unawares or what have you, now you get all that high-level stuff, but then you also become a prime target because, any good one on the loading screen shows what every player is wearing as they enter the match. So that guy, if I can get that guy, I'm running for the exit and I'm walking out of here.
It takes me back, because this is something we've had this conversation before, but for the purposes of the podcast, back in the day in Quake 2 there was a mod called Weapon of Choice, by a guy called Mark Smith, who works at Nvidia still to this day, I believe. Mark's a good mate of mine. I didn't know this when I joined Nvidia, that he was the guy that built my favorite Quake mod of all time. And the reason why it's my favorite Quake mod is exactly this principle. But in this particular version, if you killed someone, you lost access to the rocket launcher. If you killed them again without them killing you, you lost the lightning gun. Eventually you got down to an axe.
Right.
So we were running on Wireplay on this dial-up modem-based game service. We were running game systems which had amazingly capable players running around with axes, fighting newbies using rocket launchers.
Right.
And everybody had more fun.
Right.
And, this kind of principle has appeared a few times, not as often as I'd like, but, as I personally as a designer would like. But I know you had some involvement with things like gun game and stuff like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about, because I think you didn't know about weapon of choice at the time.
So, I didn't personally, and I mean, there were lots of people working on the early Call of Duty series. I was a very minor part of that series, but it was like things like gun game, that is the fundamental principle, right? Where we are effectively always at near parity. And I have a new, like, if the more skilled player is continuously presented with a new and interesting challenge, because here's the problem, right? It's the Destiny loot cave. For those of you guys who don't know, there was a bug in Destiny early on where there was this cave and monsters would walk out of it. It was very easy to just sit there and shoot them, and they would pop out like pinatas. They'd pop out all their loot, and you could just go collect it. But it was utterly, interminably boring because all you would do is just sit there, and you wouldn't even move your mouse or your stick, and you would just fire. And players did it. Players will always do the optimal thing even if they don't enjoy it, because again, there is this weird human sense that we have of like wanting to do the best thing or the most efficient thing, right? And when you have that moment, that's where things fall apart, right? Because if you give players, if your good player loves the rocket launcher, or not even loves the rocket launcher, if your good player knows the rocket launcher is the optimal weapon, they will use the rocket launcher over and over and over and over again, and it's not going to be a new experience, and it's not going to be interesting for them. And so by continuously sort of downgrading their weapon, you're continuously presenting them with a new and interesting challenge. Oh, okay, you got it with the rocket launcher, now figure it out with the lightning gun, right? Now figure it out with the axe. And so presenting your player with a way to break out of optimal loops is an excellent piece of any game, and I think a very interesting thing that you can do with your economy, right? There are ways that you can steer players out of their local maxima, which I think is important to keeping them, because otherwise eventually your players will... I've shot the loot cave for 40 hours, oh, I now have all the cool gear, but this is really boring and I'm done, right?
And they're not coming back.
Right. And so I think that using your economy to those effects, using your systems to those effects is very powerful.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a particular one which Infinity Blade, which I think was the first Epic game on mobile, had, in the first version, had this principle where each weapon had a finite amount of bonus XP, which made you want to min-max the game. You had to use every weapon. And, like I say, they didn't continue doing it. I'm not too sure why, but the principle of it for me has always been fascinating. Having this third path that drives a different level of optimization, encouraging more exposure to the potential of the gameplay, is a really interesting way of working.
Well, it's very silly, but as will be very common knowledge to anybody who is working on free-to-play or live services games, the principal function of your dailies, right? There's two types of dailies. There's the dailies which are the same every day, which I think is the weaker type of daily. And then there's the daily where get 10 headshots with a pistol, get 30 frag grenade kills, whatever. And these will rotate daily, and there's just like a huge set of them that you build as a designer, and each day the player's presented with 3, and you get some bonus XP or currency or whatever for having completed them. Those, again, are used to push the player past the bounds of what they're used to or how they would play if they just defaulted to whatever they thought was the very best, most optimal, or way that they've already solved way to play.
Yeah, and I think that they serve so many different purposes. Like, they're going to reset every day, therefore there is something to come back for every day. Right. They're going to present some level of predictable surprise, therefore there's a reason to want to experience that new thing. And those sorts of things. Yeah.
They can also, as a designer, I can also use them to drive players towards a certain experience. Nobody's using our grenades. Well, we're just going to up the frequency of the get 30 grenade kills like daily or whatever, and now people are going to start playing with them, and then we can figure out, okay, what do we need here to make these more interesting, or is it that players just had already like solved how to win the game with the shotgun, and so weren't touching them, and now we need to give them that gentle nudge, right?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about the rewards, the benefits, the currencies, consumables that we get from play. I'd be interested to sort of see your views on the sinks, the kind of the drains on that side. So how those things that we earn essentially get offset. Do you have a particular way of looking at how you build that principle into a game?
Yeah, I mean, first we have to discuss this principle of sinks anyway. Why do you need sinks in a game? Well, sinks, sort of unlike a real economy, but I'm just going to say unlike a real economy, every time a new monster spawns, it's literally printing currency, right? Every time I defeat a monster, it's a loot box, it's a treasure chest, it's a pack of cards, right? You open it up, and boom, there's something that wasn't in the world before that is usually convertible into some form of currency. And XP is a form of currency as well. Remember, like, we're not just talking gold in a game or whatever.
No.
And so if I'm doing some sort of persistent game, especially a multiplayer game, the world is literally getting continuously flooded with more and more currency, which should drive the value of every item to effectively zero, or hyperinflate the currency to a point where no one uses it or cares, right? Whatever currency that you are.
Skyrim.
Right. Old Diablo, where everybody used
exactly.
Roger Cube or whatever instead of the gold in the game. To me, so you have to create sinks. But sinks need to increase as you go, and there's two types of sinks. There is the persistent sink, and there is the renewable sink or consumable sink, right? So persistent sink. I need to buy the Vorpal Blade to actually, fight the Bandersnatch. Therefore, I have to grind X amount of currency to buy the Vorpal Blade. The Vorpal Blade will then remove that currency from the game and give me one Vorpal Blade. Now, can I resell that Vorpal Blade? Well, lots of games will say, no, once you've equipped it, once you've used it, you don't get to sell it. Okay, that's a permanent exit of exactly the cost of a Vorpal Blade. Now, if I was a designer, I say, okay, to beat this dungeon, I expect players at level 1 to beat their dungeons with nothing. I expect players at level 10 to need 1 potion. I expect players at level 20 to need 3, right? And so on, to make things that are consumable, that are sort of attacks. These can be repairing your equipment, they can be buying ammo, what have you. The big thing
Health
about
potions.
six... What was that?
Health potions.
Yeah, exactly. Right, literally, I can balance dungeon to say a level 30 player should be able to beat this, but they're probably going to need to consume about 3 health potions, which will permanently remove those from the game. The big thing about those is actually player perception more than anything else, because you need those sinks, but those sinks should also feel good. Things like repairing your equipment breaking on you does not feel good. That feels like a negative. Buying a group of potions and powering up certainly feels better, right? Weirdly, buying entrance tickets to an exclusive experience, however, can actually feel pretty good, especially if you can also buy them for your guild or your friends or whatever, or have a way to earn them for the people around you, like we were talking about earlier. Because, when everybody gets to go to the amusement park because of you get to be the hero. But whatever it is, you need to build those sinks into the game. You need both ever-growing one-time sinks and increasing sort of recurring sinks to actually remove currency from the economy that's perpetually being printed. Except, I have seen a fascinating new trend, which I think is very powerful, which I'm surprised it took us this long. I'm not sure if it's actually the right answer, but if you look at a lot of the best free-to-play games now, they have 2 currencies, right? One that's technically a purchasable currency, but you can also earn some of it in-game. And then you have your free-to-play currency. Now, we've known this, we've done this forever. But the big thing that people are doing now is your free-to-play currency is non-fungible, but you can earn infinite of it, right? And then there's a group of items that you can buy with that free-to-play currency. But we want you to be able to buy infinite of them. They're the things like, the stuff that lets you actually level up when you press the level up button and all this, right? Like, it technically removes this currency, but frankly, we don't care if you're sitting on 8 trillion gold coins or whatever. But the clever thing that's been done recently is a certain amount of paid currency will be released with each patch, but it's specific. It's actually finite and known by the designers. If you do every single thing in this patch, you can earn 3,000 gems, which translates to 8 pulls on the gacha wheel or whatever, right? Like, you're injecting an exact, known, non-transferable amount of currency to each player. So all I have to do on that patch is say, okay, I am putting in 3,000 gems worth of earnable currency, and in this patch, I am patching in 4,000 gems worth of items players will want to buy. And your economy is solved. And so it is fascinating because it makes players feel good. They feel like they're earning purchasable currency. They're earning currency to get the things they want. But the players who want to get everything are still going to have to input money in because there is no recurring printing of that money in the way that there is in gold and MMO.
I think that's really interesting, particularly when it's used in battle passes, where there is a certain amount that you can access as a free player. Right. So you could theoretically get any single item of the seasonal assets and feel good because I played more, I do more, I get something which is premium, but I also understand that I haven't paid. And I understand that anyone who has paid has to play more to get everything. And they can only get it if they play more.
The Battle Pass thing is also fascinating because the modern theory on Battle Passes, as I understand it, is that Battle Pass, if you buy it, will pay for itself, but only, and a little bit more, just a little bit, like 5 or 10% more, if you do everything. So you now have a choice, right? Like, if you're willing to dedicate a huge amount of time to the game, therefore be an enormous amount of content for other players, we're okay free rolling you on battle passes, right? It's like comps at the casino. We'll just keep giving you a free meal, but man, there's also all these other things outside of the battle pass, and if you're that hardcore enough of a player, you're probably also just laying down some money on those other things.
Because you want them. Right. Because you love the game. Because you want the things. Yeah.
Now, because of the Battle Pass, you're playing, 90 hours a month. Of course, if you're that dedicated to a hobby, cool. Yeah. I get the next Battle Pass for free. I've already earned it. Whatever. I might as well spend some money on this other thing, right? Yeah.
And I think that innovation of even free players being able to earn a Battle Pass through playing more,
right,
feels inherently satisfying.
Well, and it's this idea of graduating up players. There was this early idea in collectible card games where basically you get people who go from casual play to constructed play, from constructed play to draft play. And basically everybody had some system where they would essentially, if you played enough like Friday Night Magic or whatever, you can play this game of Standard, like you can enter this tournament for free, and then here's a draft or two that you can play for free, and once you get players to cross that line, they're much more comfortable crossing it on their own in the future, because you've also shown them the value proposition of that, and the value proposition better be there. But once
and playing a sealed deck game, I'm happy to go buy that deck to play that game because the spontaneous, I can't even talk properly, the spontaneous value of discovery of the cards that I've got in that deck to play it against other people who are also spontaneously playing is delightful.
Well, and if you're drafting or doing a sealed deck, what you're buying is an experience, right?
Yeah.
You are buying a fundamentally different experience than how you normally play that game. By laying down that money, that's what you're not buying those cards, right? You could buy those cards in a lot of ways, and the net value of those cards is probably underneath what you're paying. But you're not just paying for the item itself, like we talked about earlier. You're paying for the experience that underlies those items in that particular format, in the way it's being presented right now, that you can't get every single day, right? Like, you're paying for a unique experience that you want to have, that you're excited to have. And so I think that with all of these things, we should be thinking about that, especially when we're thinking about, okay, how do we graduate our players up from, like, unfortunately, money's the engine of creation. We've got to actually monetize. So how do we graduate our players up if we're making a purely free-to-play game from being free players to spending a comfortable amount? Because the optimal free-to-play game for me, and this is something I've been arguing for a very long time, I've seen a handful of companies that are successful at this. If you can get, like, the average ARPU, like the average revenue per user, to be $5, but actually have it be the mean revenue as well, right? Rather than having 20 users who spend $10,000 and everybody else spending nothing, your game is much better and much more stable and much more long-term sustainable. And I think that, like, when we talk about these things, putting in $10 a month into your hobby, like, we pay more than that for Netflix, right? Like, we pay more than that for so many trivialities. Heck, you probably, like, I buy a bubble tea for that much, right? And
I'm not telling you how much I spend on coffee.
By a bubble tea, I may mean literally a bubble tea.
I am aware of your bubble tea habit.
Oh, yes. But when we're thinking about this, I think that should be your goal as a free-to-play creator or as a real money monetizer. Like, don't go for just the handful of whales. You need to make an attractive value proposition in your economy for a player who wants to spend $10, $20 on your game. Because that's the other thing. I look at a lot of these games and you go, oh, I want to spend $20 on this game. I love this game. I've been playing this game a bunch. And then you look at the store and you go, oh, $20 buys me literal nothing, right?
Literal nothing,
Like, I don't even care. I will get one pull on a gacha wheel, which is probably a common item that is completely irrelevant to me, so is actually doing nothing for me if I drop this $20. No, thank you, pass, right?
Yeah.
And we've got to do better at creating satisfying monetization opportunities for players of all scales.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I argue with, for a long time about not hunting whales. I think whales is a bad analogy for game players. You know, a whale is someone who goes to Vegas with 50 grand and stays until they run out. You know,
right.
That's what a whale does. You know, that's not a good game player. A good game player might be spending $1 a month. It might be spending, $10 a month. And, like to your point, if we are going to have sustainable experiences, we have to cater for all of those audiences. I've got no problem with people dropping 10 grand on a game if they have that in disposable income, so it's trivial to them, sure. But that's not the case for a lot of people.
Well, and, I mean, just on the practicality side, if I was being as mercenary as possible, I would say, there's a very small pool of people who are totally cool with dropping 10, 20K on virtual items. You don't want to be competing for those. There is a limitless pool of people who are there's more players than our games can handle who are okay dropping $5 a month on their favorite hobby, right? There are billions of people in this world. That's okay, right? Your game, if you can get 1 million of them dropping $5 a month, you're starting to actually do okay. And if you can up that to, 20, and we very often are talking more than 1 million people, right? Very often we're talking the tens or hundreds of millions for truly successful free-to-play experiences. Great, right? That's what we want to be looking for, because there is just too much competition. The expense now to acquire one whale is so enormous, and if your games are relying on that, it's also one of those things where that's a really hard thing to design for, right? Like, how do you make sure that person gravitates to your thing? So unless you're like, have other products in the market and can transfer those players from one product to another, which is dangerous in and of itself, that's just not a perspective like that I would want to be going into designing a game and a game economy with.
No, I mean, sustainability requires dependability, and if you've
Right.
but if your mean average revenue is similar to your average revenue, then you're going to have, by definition, more players providing that basis, and therefore more stable. So it's completely go. Now, I mean, so we've talked a lot about kind of like time and the benefits that time is in terms of exchange of kind of resources, commodities, how that's used as driving progression, status, things like that. And also we've talked a little bit now about syncs and how that then extends into purchase behavior, particularly around things like battle parties. But at the end of the day, kind of when you're kind of, all right, what's the practical you're looking at a game, what are the things that anyone who is a designer looking at a game economy, what is their kind of practical things that the top 3 things that they should be paying attention to when they're looking at their game?
Well, and it's good that you brought that up, actually. I'm just going to jump really quick back to time because I shortcutted because my brain is already there, but I realized there was a big piece I didn't say. So when I talk about time and reducing everything to time, it's one of those things where I go, okay, I have some expected amount of currency earned per hour, right? All right. So now if I know that, right, and then I have a cost to buy that currency, and I know I have a sword that I think will take 2 hours for the players to earn, if they just want to earn it, and I want to sell it in my store, now I know what price I should sell it in my store for, and know how to make it a good value proposition, because I can price it, a third lower or whatever for that currency to buy out of the store than it would take to go earn, and I know I have that equation that will translate between those because I've got the common factor, the common denominator of time. And so that's when I talk about time being the universal translator for me. That's how I'm talking about it, where it allows me to price everything out because there's an underlying currency that's not visible to the player that I'm using to calculate everything else.
Yes, exactly.
So you're talking about, okay, so practicalities. We've actually gone over a lot of the practical things I always look for. I mean, I always look to make sure that the syncs are good. I always make sure to look for that we are selling experiences, that sort of thing. I think one of the things that we didn't touch on in our time in progression is sort of time per new experience or whatever, right? Like, I find a lot of games sort of mess this up. You want to, like, in just the standard generic game, whatever, you want to be giving the new player toys. You want to be giving the player new toys to play with on a fairly regular basis. And so when you're looking at your economy, both as a free player and for a paid player, but especially for free players, you want to be making sure that they're getting access to something new and exciting, or at least the promise of something new and exciting, regularly enough so that way several game sessions don't go by where they don't have anything new to do within your game and therefore have an exit point, right? It is you almost allowing them to go, yeah, I'm just going to walk away until the next patch, right? Like, you hear lots of players say until the next patch. Let me tell you, they are not coming back for that next patch.
Nope.
There are literally thousands, tens of thousands if you include mobile games, produced every month that are in the market. People have infinite to do with their time and very short attention spans. And so if you're not holding their attention, you have lost their attention.
Absolutely.
And so very often one of the things I make sure to do is, are we always introducing something new for the player to play with, to figure out, are we giving them that cycle of, I got a new thing, I figured out how to use it, I optimize with it, I'm comfortable with it, okay, now there's a new thing, and we're just sort of scaffolding that arsenal of pieces. It also actually helps you a lot from front-loading all of your information and overwhelming the player at the beginning.
And that's where I was going with it. I think this signposting of where next,
Right.
of what to look forward to, that there is something unknown. And particularly, I often end up using the Columbo as a TV show as an analogy, because one of the beautiful things about Columbo as it was written was you could see the murder. You knew the murderer at the beginning. You still watch it, not because you were trying to solve the crime, but because you were trying to work out how Columbo solved it. And that meant that anything in the scene, even if it was unintended, became something that was potential. And I think, that again, we don't want to overload players with constant effort, because we see that causes burnout in itself. But for players to have that possibility, that potential, and to see visibly there's more potential if I keep playing, I think is an essential part of that information exchange.
100%, absolutely agree.
So I think all in all, I think we've talked about a whole range of things. I know so many more. I mean, we've had lots of deep conversations. I'm sure we would continue to do so, and so many deep areas that this stuff can go into. But I think one thing I'm kind of keen on is you talked about making sure your syncs are good.
Mm.
How do you make sure your syncs are good? What are the quintessential factors that you go, yep, that works, versus that doesn't?
So, I mean, here is an area where, as much as I hate metrics are very useful to make sure that people are actually buying your syncs. And the key metric to me, or the key determining factor, is that people feel good about buying your syncs. Like, I know it's painful. Go read the comments, right? Read your Steam reviews, read the Reddit threads, because if everybody hates the fact that they have to repair their gear or whatever, maybe we need to find some other way to put this to the player, right? I always talk about WoW, and I know I'm tangenting, but I always talk about rest experience in WoW, right? For people out there who don't know, during the beta of World of Warcraft, there was a system called rest. Most of you probably know it today, right? When you were unrested, you only got half experience. And when you stopped playing, your rested meter would go up, and you'd have a certain period of time at the beginning of the day or whatever that you get 100% experience, and then you'd only get half experience after that. And players absolutely hated it. And then they changed the system. And the system became rested experience. And while you were rested, you got double experience. And the rest of the day, you got normal experience. And they just halved what everything gave you. So it was exactly identical, right? Literally under the hood, there was no difference between getting half XP when you were unrested and full XP when you were rested, as compared to getting double XP while you were rested and 100% XP when you were unrested. But perception is key, right? Like, games are in themselves fundamentally an illusion. And so a lot of the time when I'm looking at my syncs and things, one of the things I very often do is look at presentation. Does it feel good? Does it feel like you're getting something rather than losing something for putting money into this sync, right? Does this sync end up promising the player sort of a reward for putting enough into it? One of the good syncs is very often you'll have a donation system where you can donate either to new players or very often to a fictive group within the game, right? The
classic clan thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. And I'll give you, hey, if you hit this threshold of donations, I'll give you a cool, unique, exclusive item this month. And I'll do it every month. And it's one item. And the item isn't particularly great, right? Like, it's a mid-level item or whatever. But players will do it and be very happy to do it because it feels good to donate and it feels good to get this unique item. And I will get them to give away, enormous amounts of currency because those players don't really need that currency, but they feel like here's a way to use it that feels good and gets them something interesting.
And that goes at heart of some core principles of self-determination theory. That kind of sense of being recognized
Right.
for your actions is more important than the item itself. That recognition, that sense of kind of social connection is something really powerful.
And one of the things we haven't really talked about is ownership. And when I talk about ownership, I'm not talking about the simple I own this thing in the like truly literal sense, but we were talking about cosmetics earlier, right? When we talking about making something your own, it's that sense, right? It's that ability to, put a special title next to your character or whatever. And donations are a great system for that. If I can give you like hero of the people or whatever for donating 200 million gold coins, great. A lot of people are going to do it. But also, it's sort of, if there are things that are unique and monthly that say I was here then, right? It is a sense of, it's not exactly pride, but like history and memory to a player to have that thing in their item that was that event on month 2, right? And they look back and they go, yeah, I was there then, and then it reminds them of all those cool things they did and how the game has changed and evolved. And so making sure that your syncs provide these sort of things that can present a sense of ownership of their account, of their play, without necessarily breaking the actual mechanics or systems of your game, is another great way to place syncs beyond just things that interact with the raw mechanics.
I think it's fascinating, particularly around. So I'm thinking about Subway Surfer, which actually had you go to Rome. One of the first cities you visited was Rome, and then a year later you went back to Rome.
Yep.
And there's a reason why a very, very simple running game has 4 billion downloads nowadays. Sadly, I only got 2 hours of consultancy on the game, but never mind. Such is life.
But there's a good example. If they can get $1 per user per month, holy gods, right?
Oh, and the survey goes are fantastic as well. Anyway, but I think this is a whole fascinating area. This idea of thinking about the stories that we share and how that connects into the fundamental systems of the game and the syncs of the game. And particularly for me, it's a case of, I think we're going to see more people looking at games like soap operas rather than as movies. And I think that will make, that's actually, I think, a better fit, because at the end of the day, what is a soap opera but something which we feel we're part of the journey of?
Right.
Whereas a movie, we're just there to watch the ride.
And sort of, if there are ways to leave something behind to impact the world, that's also very, very powerful. And we saw this in early MMOs, where like the first person to do X thing would get their name forever engraved on the castle wall or whatever. Super powerful. One of the most powerful experiences I had in games was actually years and years ago. It was this Minecraft game, but it was on a USB stick. And people would play, and it was a bunch of designers I knew. People would play until they died once. And then they wouldn't say anything. They would just hand off the USB stick to somebody else. And whatever they built, whatever was in the world, was still there, right? And you'd walk around, and there's this hidden history, right? And it was a beautiful experience. And I want to capture that in other games someday.
That sounds absolutely incredible. I love all that kind of print. And again, I got a tiny sense of that during COVID, when a few folks reached out to me who were trying to rebuild PlayStation Home.
Oh, yeah.
And that, I mean, as somebody, because that was obviously such a key part of my career. And then seeing, like, we're 10 years later now.
Yep.
1st of April 2015 is when they shut it down, and we're about to get to that point. But the fact that a whole bunch of people basically went back to the binaries and recreated it as a PC experience, and it's currently running, and Sony didn't shut it off. It just shows how much, for those people, it was such a part of their identity. And I think that's the power of games. That's the power of getting an economy right, is that we create those meaningful moments. We create that sense of powerful shared experience.
Well, and if we think about it, right, games, some days I am mortified looking at the time humanity has spent on the games I've worked on. But that said, like, if you think about the things you've invested, the amount of time you've invested into some games, of course those things are going to be big. Of course they're going to be meaningful to you, right? Like, they were genuinely an important part of your life, and we as designers should acknowledge that and treat them that way.
Absolutely. And on that note, thank you very much, James. That's fantastic. And if anyone wants to find out more about you and what you are up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Just check out Extra Credits on YouTube. You can probably, if you really need to, find me, bombard me on LinkedIn. But I would definitely say, if you want my ideas, whatever, check me out on YouTube. And if you see me at a conference, come say hi.
And I can't recommend Extra Credits highly enough. It is ridiculously good, and it hurts me to say it, but honestly, it's one of my favorite processes I go through to make sure that I'm not talking nonsense, is checking out what people like James say on that channel. So guys, thank you very much, and if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe and share, and all the usual stuff, and we'll be back again talking to another great designer about gaming economy design shortly. Thank you very much.